Hello. This is Monday, June 19th, 2023. Juneteenth, as it is known across the United States of America. Today, the temperature in this area of Kentucky, Lexington, will go up to 73 degrees. I was thinking that thunderstorms are going to be coming this evening, but they are going on right now, and according to the weather source, will be going on throughout the day into late evening. This is a sideshow, and I'm Theodore Parker. If you're watching the sideshow on Facebook and Instagram, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And if you're watching the sideshow on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget about the sideshow coffee cup, 11-ounce ceramic, dishwasher safe, etc., etc. Buy it from me for $17 plus shipping and handling. Pay me through Cash App, $ TR Parker 1, all caps. So I've taken a little time to do some things away from the show. But I see your friend requests are still coming in daily, 24/7. So I will acknowledge that in the upcoming days. Juneteenth has some history behind it, with it, that's pertaining to Black culture. And I thought I would hit a few of those high points today. But before I get into that, I know one of the things I last left you with was addressing mass shootings based on automatic rifles and handguns. So as I was preparing to come on the show, I noticed that there have been mass shootings over the weekend across the United States. Most significantly, there was one at a Juneteenth celebration in Willowbrook, Illinois, that left 1 dead and at least 22 hurt. Across the country, 6 dead and dozen injured in mass shootings. Events of Juneteenth. I found an article that kind of covers some of the unsavory parts of it, especially related to slavery. To condense it, it's the day when the last person heard the Emancipation Proclamation, that slavery was over, and this was in Texas. So, I thought I would share this with you. Take a few minutes if you can afford to sit there and listen, or stand there and listen. This is called The Big Lie of Slavery. The slave trade was the worst human-inflicted atrocity ever. I'm sharing this because this person had this article published in Zora, and it's a little different take than what we usually hear about slavery and 400 years and things of that nature. So he's addressing some of these comments. And if you can see, it starts out with a picture of slaves crammed onto a slave ship. So here we go. It's been repeated so many times that we accept as historical fact that about 15 million Africans died in the transatlantic slave trade over a period of 400 years. This figure is reported by everyone from the United Nations to African Studies departments at major universities. I learned this figure in Black Studies courses in college, and I've repeated it in my own writing. It turned out to be a lie. The death toll was closer to 50 to 60 million. This Juneteenth, it's time the truth is told. I'm reminded of how Jews rightfully feel when some Jew-hating Holocaust denier tries to push absurd theories that Hitler and the Nazis only killed 1 or 2 million Jews instead of 6 million. Not that 2 million wouldn't still be an atrocity, but Jew haters peddle that nonsense for one reason: to diminish the severity of the trauma and genocide, to make us think that we ought not to make as big a deal of it, that it shouldn't be cause for unending alarm about the dangers of Jew hatred, or that Jews don't need their own home back, that the Holocaust is just one of many similar genocides undertaken by other unruly rulers in the last 200 years. The Khmer Rouge, which would be in Asia, Southeast Asia, killed 2 million in Cambodia. Nearly 1.5 million were killed in Circassians in the 1800s. That's why this article encompasses all cultures over the past amount of time. The Ottomans massacred between 600,000 and 1.5 million Armenians, which would be in Europe, from 1915 to 1917. About 800,000 Rwandans were killed in 1994, which you knew about the Hutu and the Zeta in Africa. 1 million to 2 million Bangladesh were killed in East Pakistan in 1971. What are another 1 or 2 million Jews among the masses? So here we have that little paragraph that covers cultures from around the world over the past amount of time. What are another 1 or 2 million Jews among the masses? Thus, according to Jew haters, Nazi genocide that wiped 2 out of every 3 Jews in Europe was no big deal. Just another genocide and a long line of them. Jews like me, the person who wrote the article, get outraged when we hear Nazi lovers spew that bullshit. It turns out that far worse has been done to deliberately diminish and limit the severity of the African slave trade. We should be even more outraged by this lie. The causes of death and destruction of Africans and their communities in the slave trade are vast. And from here, he takes a different slant than what we usually hear with the explanations that go with it. Africans died fighting against would-be kidnappers in Africa. While it's impossible to know the exact numbers, historians know most Africans were kidnapped after intense battles between African communities and African slave dealers, resulting in significant death in the millions. Many Africans who didn't die in battle were kidnapped, and then many died on the long trek from their devastated communities to the shores of Africa as they were transported like caged animals. So if we're looking at Africa, then we're right here, and we're talking about going to the West Coast, which would be on our left side as you face it, as just as California is on the West Coast of the United States. So wherever they were engaged in battle, captured, and transported to the coast would have been across the continent, by way of explanation. Upwards to 10 to 20 million Africans taken from their homes in Africa's interior didn't even make the journey to the coast. More Africans died in tiny stone dungeons built by the Europeans once the survivors arrived at Africa's western coast. Kidnapped Africans were held in these structures malnourished for as long as a year, while their captors waited for slave ships to arrive so they could trade them for sugar, tobacco, and other products. Because remember, this was happening at a time when there were not airplanes, there were not jet flights from country to country, international transportation, all those things. Additional Africans died on ships in the Middle Passage. Some committed suicide. Some were tortured. Some died of disease or malnutrition. Some died in the rebellion. Some Africans arrived disabled or suffering from disease from the Middle Passage journey and were then killed on arrival. The nightmarish conditions on the voyage where Africans were shackled wreaked havoc on them. Historians place the number of Africans shipped to the Americans at anywhere from 10 to 15 million, 10 to 50% of whom died. That's at least 2 to 3 million more Africans dead. More Africans died on slave plantations, which is what we are more familiar with as far as history is given to us on this side of things. To put these numbers into perspective, the life expectancy of Africans on slave plantations in the Americas was 22 years old due to overworking, failure to provide any health care, and disease caused by poor conditions. The total number of enslaved Africans who died on plantations in the Americas because of slavery, including enslaved descendants, children, grandchildren, etc., of people stolen from Africa, easily is in the many millions. And that doesn't account for the slaves experimented on by so-called scientists in the southern U.S., long before Nazi angel of death Joseph Mengele. Numerous other Africans were killed or died trying to escape slavery. And then to top it all off, when slavery came to an official end, hundreds of thousands of more former enslaved people died of starvation, excuse me, in the U.S. alone because they had no means of survival. You don't need a Texas Instruments scientific calculator to figure out that the total number of deaths caused by the entirety of the slave trade easily exceeds 30 million and is likely more like 50 to 60 million. Now, presently, the United States is showing a population of around 350 million. So what would that be, like 1/5 of the population of the United States presently? To add insult to injury, the idea that the atrocities were over some long 400 years is also highly misleading and intentionally limiting, making it sound like it was less horrific because of the long period of time. It turns out that over half of the entire slave trade took place during a 60-year period in the 18th century in 3 countries: Britain, Portugal, and France. So let's keep it real. It wasn't 15 million dead, and most of it wasn't over 400 years. Because of the lack of records and survivor narratives of every step of the process, research isn't precise as to exactly how many Africans died in the slave trade. But all told, the real numbers are anywhere from 30 on the very low side to over 100 million, with most scholars who have looked deeper into the total slave trade placing the number around 50 to 60 million. In the history of the world, the only human-inflicted atrocities that rival the African slave trade were Genghis Khan, Asia, who killed upwards of 40 million during the Mongol conquest of the 1200s, the Roman Empire, which killed millions, Communist China, so-called Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962, and resulted in famine deaths of 15 to 55 million, and Stalin's communist regime, which caused between 9 and 30 million deaths. It's bad enough that Africans and their descendants suffered the single worst atrocity in the history of the world, but for us to diminish that atrocity and place it in the long list of other atrocities is unkosher salt on an unforgivably inflicted wound. So that was that article. So we know there are many activities associated with Juneteenth. Some of them took place over the weekend. Some of them are scheduled for today here in Kentucky. I think a few of them, there was a festival in Louisville yesterday, a daytime event, African Sunset here in Lexington. Tomorrow in Louisville, Dr. Terrell Lamont will be speaking. plus festivals, barbecues, live music, and more taking place to celebrate Juneteenth. Another thing, since we had that quote unquote dark side of it, I thought I would share maybe an uplifting thing. 20 inspiring activities to celebrate Juneteenth. We are teachers. Now, this one is a little bit different because it's taken from the activities that go on with students and teachers, but it was kind of inspiring to me, and I thought it was also worth passing on, just like I passed on those facts just now. So there's some videos and things attached with it. It's activity orientated, but the introduction is really self-explanatory, so I'll share that. It begins Juneteenth, excuse me, now a federally recognized holiday, is gaining well-deserved recognition across the country. And this is from teachers' perspective in dealing with their students, although we all would agree that parents are teachers as well and have first influence, contact, and instructions for children. As teachers, we should foster understanding, empathy, and appreciation of African American history and culture in our classrooms throughout the year. But Juneteenth is a special opportunity to do it. Use these Juneteenth activities to spark dialogue, critical thinking, and creativity in your students while empowering them to become change agents for a more inclusive and equitable world. What is Juneteenth? Juneteenth celebrates the emancipation of enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, on June 19, 1865. Prior to this date, many enslavers withheld notice of freedom from those they enslaved. 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation has taken effect in the Confederacy, on paper, federal troops arrived in Galveston, and Major General Gordon Granger finally issued the following order, informing people of emancipation. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. General Orders Number 3. While not all African Americans in Texas were freed on this date due to refusal of their enslavers or attacks against them that led to extreme harm or death, Juneteenth, also known as Freedom Day, Emancipation Day, Liberation Day, Jubilee Day, is the most widely celebrated days of emancipation in the United States. In its 128th year, Black Americans continue to find ways to celebrate, including cookouts, parades, public events, musical performances, activities, and community work. For educators, Juneteenth provides a beautiful opportunity to celebrate Black Americans and to teach authentic U.S. history to our students. So it also starts with these 20 activities: create pictures, posters, or journal entries referencing the National Museum of African American History and Culture, read books about Juneteenth, several videos, watch videos and discuss with your students about Juneteenth coming from TED or YouTube. Create a community mural or poster campaign. Introduce and discuss primary sources like the Emancipation Proclamation. Read and write about Frederick Douglass' keynote, What is the Slave, is the 4th of July.
Earth and heaven ring with the harmony
So this one was particularly good because it had his descendants, Frederick Douglass's descendants, young children, I think maybe 20 years old and under, that each read a portion of the speech. And at the time, Frederick Douglass gave the speech on July 5th, 1852. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. So it was pretty impressive for a video on YouTube. All this is grouped together. Teach about reparations. We know in California, they're going through some things about that. Invite a special guest to speak about Juneteenth. So here it says, Penguin Random House Speakers Bureau has a list of speakers whom you can invite to speak about Juneteenth. Bring Black joy to your classroom. Again, National Museum of African American History and Culture. Learn how to have a culturally responsive classroom from Unearthing Joy. This is a book that Pharrell Williams contributed to the foreword. You might not be able to see that very well. Anyway, and Celebrate Black Creatives. Amanda Gorman. Because, you know, President Biden made Juneteenth a national holiday when he came into office, and the inauguration was where Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb, was first read. Support local business, Black businesses. Attend a local Juneteenth celebration. And in this, I've been trying to be cautious about saying events and things to attend. Let that be a personal choice on your part. But one of the things that one of the young men said in the Frederick Douglass portion on the video was, we have been fed a lot of pessimism or pessimistic ideas, and we should not just consume that pessimism. You know, we should fight for change. We should fight for the opportunities. And we should be aware and not let the idea of hope be extinguished. So in being mindful of that, you know, coming from a young man who is a descendant of Frederick Douglass, it kind of touched me. So, take a virtual field trip to a Black History Museum. Learn the Juneteenth song, which I didn't know there was a Juneteenth song, so that's another thing. Start a discussion with the class about freedom. Read and reflect about June 17, 2021. And another one, celebrate with red food and learn about its cultural significance. I did not know that. So, commit to anti-racism and celebrating Black history all year long. So those are the things that I wanted to share on Juneteenth 2023. And tomorrow, Thursday, June 22nd, is the first day of summer. That's it. Hashtag.